OK, we have some major breaking news from West Ham. Let's go live to the London Stadium because Geraint Hughes is there for us with it. Geraint, what have you got?
I can confirm in the last minute we have been told that David Moyes and West Ham, by mutual consent, David Moyes will be leaving the club when his contract expires now at the end of the season. So confirmation, West Ham confirmed David Moyes to leave the club by mutual consent at the end of the 23-24 season when his contract expires. Probably not the most surprising news given how developments have sped along at quite a rate in terms of potential replacements for David Moyes, but we were obviously early in the day. There was the expectation that David Moyes would complete the season with West Ham, and then it would be he would sit down and talk with the board about where they would go if they did have a future together. But confirmation now in the last 90 seconds that David Moyes will leave West Ham by mutual consent at the end of the season.
And Geraint, I mean, this is the news I guess we were expecting, given the rumours that we'd heard already about Julen Lopetegui potentially sitting down with West Ham and agreeing a deal in principle should David Moyes leave.
Well, there is no longer that should, and the ifs, buts and maybes we can start to whittle them down. As far as Julen Lopetegui goes, I can't stand here and say that he is going to be appointed the next West Ham manager right now. What we do know as fact is that David Moyes is to leave the club, and that we know as fact is that Julen Lopetegui has agreed in principle a deal with West Ham. It seems there's a little way to go yet on maybe dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that one, but you can see the direction of travel here. We also know as well is that perhaps West Ham will now be changing the way that their model of football behind the scenes is run. When David Moyes came back to the club, West Ham, for his second spell in 2019, it was as manager. I use that word advisedly, manager, not head coach. He wanted to have a very hands-on approach, position in terms of recruitment, as well as what you do with the day-to-day managing of the players and getting prepared for games, etc., etc., etc. I think the plan is for a more European style of model here at West Ham, where the manager, as we know, Julen Lopetegui has agreed in principle a deal to take over at West Ham. He would become a head coach, not a manager. Tim Steidten joined the club last summer, joined West Ham last summer as the technical director. His role will change with the departure of David Moyes. He'll have more impact on recruitment, etc., so that a manager coming in can perhaps concentrate on just the playing side of things, getting the players prepared, getting the team prepared, and that someone else can take the load off, as we're seeing at so many clubs, not just across Europe, not just in the Premier League, but in the UK as a whole now, where you have a head coach and then you have a sporting director, a technical director that does a little bit of the work that perhaps a more traditional manager in the past would have done. So that's why we'll be seeing maybe someone like Tim Steidten, who has been at the club since last summer. His role will begin to flourish now with the departure of David Moyes and any incoming manager that comes here to the London Stadium.
Geraint, just bear with me because I've got the statement from David Moyes as well as David Sullivan. I'd like to read the David Moyes statement to you if I can. He said, I've enjoyed 4.5 brilliant years at West Ham, and the club is in a stronger position than when I returned back in 2019. When I joined West Ham for a second time, the club was placed above the relegation zone, and it has been a terrific journey to have achieved 3 consecutive seasons in Europe. He goes on to say, after leading the club to safety, we guided the team to finishes of 6th and 7th in the Premier League. I was delighted when we won the Europa Conference League title last June, the club's first major trophy in some 43 years. He goes on to say, Ger, that I would like to thank all the players for their support and all the success that they've achieved over the last 4.5 years. I've really enjoyed working with everyone at West Ham, and I would like to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to manage this great club. And finally, he says, I wish my eventual successor, the directors, the players, the staff and the fans and everybody at West Ham, all the very best for the future. But I guess, Geraint, it's going to be really disappointing, isn't it, for David Moyes to sort of have his time at West Ham, which he will, as he rightly says, was a great success, come to an end like this, you'd think?
Yeah, although it is at the end of a contract, that is the one sort of maybe unique difference between a lot of managers who leave, who are who are actually formally sacked, aren't they? With David Moyes now, his contract is coming to an end. It runs out now. Contracts normally run to June the 30th, don't they, in football with players and the management, but technically at the end of the season. West Ham and David Moyes have obviously mutually agreed to announce that decision, that upon the expiry of the contract, he will no longer be the West Ham, that they're not looking to renew a contract or work on a new deal. Yes, there's bound to be some disappointment because, David Moyes is very much a football man, as a player and a manager for quite a long time, although he's only 61 years of age. But, I know for sections of the West Ham fans, at times he's not been Mr. Popular, but he has, he can point to success with West Ham. 3 seasons ago, the 2020-21 season, West Ham's highest ever finish in the Premier League. They came sixth with a haul of 65 points. A year later, they were seventh. Last season, European trophy achieved, the UEFA Conference League trophy, that great victory over Fiorentina in the final as well. That's a trophy, a serious trophy in the cabinet here at the London Stadium. So I'm sure it'll be tinged with some sadness, some disappointment. But it's the end of a journey with West Ham and David Moyes. First began, of course, back in 2017 when he came in on an initial 6-month deal. He left in 2018, but then by December of 2019 he was back at the club, and he's led them ever since. We've listed a little bit of his success with the club there now, but West Ham clearly looking to go not only in another direction with their head coach, but also perhaps with a footballing model, a head coach rather than a manager, and also with a technical director having a lot more say than perhaps previously at West Ham, with that appointment of Tim Steighton last year, that he will maybe come through with this model that West Ham are looking at going forward. And as we know, there has been no official appointment of Julen Lopetegui today. The club aren't commenting on that at the moment, but we know that a deal has been agreed between Lopetegui and West Ham in principle, if not signed.
Yeah, so Geraint, you'd think that now this is all out in the open, that deal will be kind of something that goes quickly now, you'd think, wouldn't you? You don't think that we'll be stood here in 3 weeks' time still talking about this. You'd think that this might happen almost overnight.
Well, you say that, Vicky. Football is a strange animal. Yes, that's what you would think. And it does look as if there has been significant work done behind the scenes. This won't become just a surprise between David Moyes and the club. I'm sure they have been talking for a while, even if they're saying they were going to talk at the end of the season. Decisions like this don't happen just like that. But Lopetegui is, I'll put a little caveat in here, he's a wanted man elsewhere as well, not just by West Ham here in East London, but he's also wanted by Bayern Munich have put their hat in the ring for him as well. And there's a cast list of pretty much hundreds that are up for the job at Bayern Munich to take over from Thomas Tuchel. There are so many names in there, but Lopetegui is now a name on that list. Until a deal is signed, sealed, and delivered and stamped, you never say it's a done deal. However, you do get a feeling that the work behind the scenes with West Ham around David Moyes and around what we've been telling you about Julen Lopetegui as well, is that there's a very high odds on him becoming the successor to David Moyes, albeit not as manager, but as head coach.
Yeah, and just in terms of David Moyes, you and I know him very well. This certainly won't be the end for him. I mean, he's 61 years of age and he'll want to go on and go further in the game, won't he?
I can't see this. 61 is not old at all. He lives and breathes the game. The times where I've mostly seen him, when he's been in a brief period, when he's not been at a job, and I've seen it at a game somewhere, I've always gone and said hello to him. He's always absolutely such a courteous, polite man away from football as well. When you just quickly go and say hello, he's managed several big clubs. Obviously, the West Ham job. He's been in this one since December 2019. But you can't imagine that David Moyes is somebody that's ready to sit on the sofa and put his feet up and necessarily watch football for too long. He'll be itching to be standing on a touchline somewhere, looking nervous and agitated and anxious as he does so often, and get back into the game as well. With all that knowledge he's got, whether it be from the time at Preston North End, Everton, the short period of time at Manchester United. He's also got some experience overseas as well before coming back to this country, obviously with these two spells at West Ham United as well.
Just finally, Gare, you know, look, they have said, they've been very clear, West Ham, saying that the recruitment process for David's successor has begun. The club will make no further comment until a new appointment is confirmed. But just to be really clear, they'll have to move quickly in terms of Lopetegui, you'd think, because there are interests from other clubs as well for his services, aren't there?
What reason not to move quickly? Because they've moved fairly swiftly, I suppose, in announcing the fact that David Moyes will leave the club when his contract expires, i.e. at the end of the season. There will be, mutual consent between the two. So there have been discussions and an agreement there for David Moyes to sign a new contract, to move away. You would think that, a club like West Ham, with the people they have on their board and behind the scenes as well, is that discussions are very well advanced on a successor. I would not have thought that we'd have had this announcement if a deal with a new manager. And as we've been saying and said several times today, we know that a deal has been agreed in principle with Julen Lopetegui, if not signed, that will move pretty swiftly, especially as we've just alluded to there. There are a number of other clubs, especially within Europe. Bayern Munich is that club that we've mentioned there, that are looking for potential new managers themselves. If you've got somebody that you want, the calibre you want, with the setup, with the model going forward as well, why hang around? Dot those I's, cross those T's.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Geraint, for reacting to that news so very quickly this evening. David Moyes is to leave West Ham at the end of the season.